On this Tuesday night, the much-anticipated first face-to-face meeting between the Prime Minister and the U.S. President.
We're going to be friends with Canada.
Mark Carney's message to Donald Trump about Canada.
It won't be for sale, ever.
Trump's response, the push to eliminate tariffs, and Carney's strategy to charm Trump. Intense cross-examination. One defense lawyer's accusations against the woman at the center of the Hockey Canada sex assault trial. And the process to choose a new pope is about to begin.
It's a beautiful experience.
How it will work and what the College of Cardinals is looking for in a new pontiff.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
A handshake anticipated by millions. Prime Minister Mark Carney greeted by the U.S. President for their first face-to-face meeting since Carney's election last week. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Despite attacking Canada in a social media post shortly before the meeting, Donald Trump delivered what many saw as a toned-down approach to Canada today, even choosing to praise Carney in the Oval Office and speak highly of their relationship following the meeting.
I like him. You know, he's a nice man. We get along very well. We had a great meeting today. Really good. I think the relationship's going to be very strong.
The warm welcome couldn't hide the thorns in the relationship, though. Tariffs, trade, and repeated threats of annexation all reappeared as talking points. We'll have analysis and reaction from here at home and around the world tonight. But we begin in Washington with David Akin, who's traveling with the Prime Minister. David.
Well, Carolyn, like any good Canadian traveling abroad, Prime Minister Mark Carney was polite but firm. Almost as soon as the two leaders sat down, Donald Trump was making the argument for Canada to become the 51st state.
I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages.
But there was Mark Carney, ready to politely say no.
Respectfully, Canadians' view on this is not going to change on the 51st state.
Trump tried the soft sell, but watch Carney's silent reaction.
But never say never. Never say never.
Of course, Carney campaigned on a promise to stand up to Trump, but when it came to other matters, Carney signaled flexibility and a willingness to negotiate. Trump was asked, for example, if there was anything Carney could say to take tariffs off of Canada.
No.
Why not?
Just the way it is.
And here, Carney saw an opening.
I'll say a word on USMCA, if I may, Mr. President. It is a basis for a broader negotiation. Some things about it are going to have to change.
Behind closed doors, the two leaders touched on a wide range of issues: China, Ukraine, Iran, in addition to trade and the border. Officials said the tone was courteous, that Trump was curious. Carney said it was constructive.
We have a lot more work to do. I'm not trying to suggest at any respect that we can have one meeting and everything's changed, but now we are engaged and very fully engaged.
Carney said he would next meet Trump at the G7 summit this summer in Kananaskis, Alberta.
I look forward, not back, and I think we established a good basis today.
Now, perhaps another sign that the Trump administration is ready to hear more appeals from the Carney administration. Consider this. Mark Carney arrived in Washington last night, and he stayed at Blair House. That is the official residence of guests of the White House, and he was invited to stay there by President Trump. And then, when Carney arrived at the White House earlier today, he was ushered in with an honor guard. And those two honors have not been accorded every world leader that has come to the White House in the last few months. David Akin, Global News, Washington.
Today's discussion between the two leaders will set the stage for Canada-U.S. relations. Jackson Prosco is outside the White House and joins us with more analysis. Jackson, how did Carney's tone impact the meeting today?
Well, Carolyn, the stakes were incredibly high for the Prime Minister today, and given how testy the Canada-U.S. relationship has been lately, there was the very real possibility that this could all have gone very badly. It all could have gone sideways. But two things seemed to soften the mood. First, President Trump was completely transparent about the fact that he was no fan of Justin Trudeau and is much happier dealing with Mark Carney. And second is the way Carney spoke. And I want to dial in on that back and forth between Carney and Trump over making Canada the 51st state. Listen very closely to the full exchange and how Carney uses Trump's own words against him.
I'm a real estate developer at heart. when you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said that's the way it was meant to be.
If I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever.
Jackson, it seems like the PM chose his talking points very carefully. How else did he try to win over Trump?
Well, we know with Trump that flattery always wins. And right out of the gate, Carney heaped praise, but also suggested that the two men are essentially working toward the same goal. Take a listen.
You're a transformational president, the focus on the economy with a relentless focus on the American worker, securing your borders, ending the scourge of fentanyl and other opioids, and securing the world. And I've been elected with my colleagues here, with the help of my colleagues here. I'm going to spread the credit to transform Canada with a similar focus on the economy, securing our borders, again on fentanyl, much greater focus on defense and security, securing the Arctic and developing the Arctic.
And clearly that praise worked, Carolyn, because by the end of the conversation, Trump pointed out that, yes, there are points of conflict, but that this was a friendly chat. He even joked that there wouldn't be a blow-up in the Oval Office like there'd been with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Carolyn?
Jackson Prosco in Washington, thank you. Well, Canadians weren't the only ones watching this meeting closely. Carney and Trump filled the airways on all major U.S. networks and made news around the world. Eric Sorensen reports.
Trump put up his hand, Carney did likewise. And for the next 40 minutes in the Oval Office, Canadians watched with rapt attention every comment, every glance. The future of our country and our relationship with the U.S. president hanging in the balance. But American news coverage was also exhaustive. Recognition that Canada's trade is critical to the U.S. economy.
One of the first questions he was asked is, do you think Canada could be one of the first trade deals? And he said, I would love that. That is not what the administration has been publicly signaling.
I think Americans have registered, perhaps finally, that Canada really matters to them economically.
U.S. networks diverge, of course, in their news coverage. MSNBC skeptical of Trump's facts.
There's a farrago of mistakes that he made. I mean, this figure that he uses of our trade deficit with Canada of $200 billion, it's nothing like that.
While over on Fox, they liked Trump's dominance in the meeting.
I thought a critical moment for Canada was the outmaneuvering that President Trump did with Carney. He said, we'll always protect you militarily, and that means everything else is on the table. Good luck with that.
But even Fox gave Carney his due.
He saw Zelensky talk himself out of a deal in the room, and he wasn't going to make that mistake.
But it wasn't only American networks covering Carney's visit minute by minute. The world was watching intently.
President Donald Trump hosting the Canadian Prime Minister.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is set to meet U.S. President Donald Trump.
The headline in Le Monde, Canada will never be for sale. And what world leader wouldn't try to discern from Carney best practices when it comes to meeting the unpredictable U.S. president?
What we saw in our prime minister today was really a masterclass in how to handle Donald Trump. He was respectful, but at the same time, he also knew how to, push back.
Pushed back gently on sovereignty, but left trade for later. Trump's message to the world, he will slap tariffs even on his friends, which means Mark Carney, however successful today's meeting was, will have his work cut out for him. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
President Trump also said the U.S. has a tremendous abundance of energy and that it doesn't need Canadian energy. But the fact is, the U.S. relies heavily on Canadian energy exports. In 2023, Canada supplied roughly 60% of crude oil imported by the U.S. and shipped enough electricity to power more than 5 million American homes every day. Alberta's premier wants more energy infrastructure projects like pipelines to get off the ground and says she's hopeful Prime Minister Carney can reset the relationship with the U.S. But as Heather Yorks-West explains, a better deal for Smith's province is priority number one.
On a day when all eyes were on Washington, Alberta's premier says it was her strategy to enter the chat.
I wanted to make sure that Eastern Canada knows all of our grievances. I don't think necessarily the reporting on Alberta's grievances are covered particularly well in Eastern Canada.
We have fought these attacks.
It's why Danielle Smith says she chose to deliver an 18-minute speech outlining her province's anger and frustration with the federal government in the middle of Alberta's afternoon. Prime time in the East. But the fact that it was a day before the Prime Minister's visit to the White House?
I made the decision to have the speech a week after the election. I think that Prime Minister Carney has his work cut out for him.
It doesn't strengthen Canada's position. Of course, people in the United States, the strategists there are going to be looking for any sort of chinks in the armor, and this is something that they might want to try to exploit or take advantage of.
Ontario's premier seems to agree, appearing to take a shot at Smith in a speech Tuesday morning for opening the door to a provincial referendum about whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada.
We need to stay united. We're so much stronger when we're all sticking together. So hopefully that's never going to happen.
Smith maintains that she does not support separatism, but would honor the wishes of Albertans if citizens put the subject to a vote next year.
They should be taking it very seriously, even having this get to a vote, that campaigns can move those numbers significantly, that campaigns on referendum votes like in Brexit started at a pretty low number and moved pretty significantly by the time folks entered to the voting booth.
The discontent of the West, something the new federal government can't ignore.
Canada is stronger when we work together. As an Albertan, I firmly believe that. You can always ask a question, but I know what I would respond.
Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
There's breaking news out of Ottawa. Andrew Scheer, former Conservative leader, will take over parliamentary leadership duties after Pierre Poilievre lost his seat in the federal election. Conservative MPs met for the first time today since voters cast their ballots. And Poilievre is promising change as he tries to chart a path back into the House of Commons. Touria Izri reports.
Returning to Parliament, but not as Prime Minister or even an MP.
Obviously, we didn't come out on top, and that's disappointing, but there is a lot to be thankful for.
Striking a more humble tone, the Conservative leader took reporters' questions for the first time since his election loss and preparing his political comeback.
We have a path back into Parliament to allow me to hold the government to account.
The Conservative MP for the Alberta riding of Battle River Crowfoot is stepping aside to allow Poilievre to run in a by-election. A vote that Elections Canada says will cost taxpayers an estimated $1.7 million.
When you get knocked down, you get up and get going.
The Conservative leader wasted no time visiting the safe riding he hopes to represent.
I need to learn and grow, and our team needs to expand.
A familiar face will stand in for Poilievre in Parliament.
I'll be taking over the parliamentary leadership duties of the caucus until Mr. Poilievre rejoins us in the House.
Former Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, who lost the election in 2019, will temporarily take over as the opposition leader in the House of Commons until Poilievre can win a seat. But will a central figure on Poilievre's team stay on? His campaign manager, Jenny Byrne, faces criticism for the campaign's tone, being slow to pivot to Donald Trump's threats, and for turning down outside advice. Poilievre thanked Byrne, but would not say if she'll remain as a key advisor.
She did a lot of hard work, and our team has a lot to be proud of.
MPs holding their first post-mortem after the election appear to be standing by him.
We campaigned under the leadership of Pierre Poilievre, who has made it his mission to put Canadians first to restore affordability.
Even if Poilievre wins a future by-election, he'll likely have to wait until the fall to return to the House of Commons. Another hurdle for a leader without a seat or a stage to directly attack the Liberals. Carolyn?
Touria Izri, thank you. The federal NDP has chosen Don Davies as the party's new interim leader. The MP from BC will take over from Jagmeet Singh, who resigned on election night after he lost his own seat and the NDP lost official party status. Davies has represented his Vancouver Kingsway riding since 2008 and led the NDP negotiations with the Liberals over dental care and pharmacare legislation in the last session of Parliament. Under cross-examination, coming up, the accusations the defense made against the woman at the center of the Hockey Canada sexual assault trial. The prosecution's key witness endured a tough day of questioning at the World Junior Hockey sex assault trial. The complainant faced a fresh round of cross-examination from defense lawyers. She is accusing 5 former players of sexually assaulting her in a London, Ontario hotel in 2018. Sean O'Shea was in court for the testimony, and a warning, some of it is disturbing.
On the 11th day of the trial, the lawyer for Michael McLeod went on the offensive, attacking the credibility of the female complainant, EM, who alleges she was sexually assaulted by 5 hockey players: Alex Formanton, Dylan Dubé, Carter Hart, Cal Foote, and McLeod, who also faces a second charge of being party to the offense of sexual assault. The men have all pleaded not guilty. EM testified she drank heavily at a local London bar called Jack's, where she met McLeod and some other players in June of 2018. She said she didn't know at the time they were members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team. Lawyer David Humphrey suggested she did, arguing she was attracted to McLeod after being introduced to him as being loaded and elite player. EM says she didn't know until a day later who McLeod was. McLeod's lawyer brought up the fact that EM had a boyfriend at the time, saying that the then 20-year-old danced closely with the players, touching some of the men on their crotches. Previously, EM testified some of the men guided her hand to their crotches. She chose to leave the bar and go back to McLeod's hotel room for sex. I was really drunk and easily persuaded, but I was interested in him as well, she said. Humphrey said EM didn't look intoxicated, in surveillance videos arguing she was steady on her feet coming back to the hotel. You made a choice, Humphrey told EM, who said the initial sex with McLeod was her choice. Quote, with just him, with one man. Yes, she said. She previously testified she engaged in various non-consensual sex acts with 5 men in McLeod's room, after McLeod texted other hockey players to join them. Humphrey suggested to EM it was she who asked McLeod to invite the other men into the room in the first place. EM said she did not. She testified she was made to kneel on the hotel room for oral sex at the insistence of the men. She says she was humiliated, spat on, and slapped to the point of pain. She told the court she didn't leave, but at various times had tried. I felt I couldn't think clearly to make a choice to get out of the room. Humphrey said EM was verbally flirting with the players. I don't have any memory of that, EM said. McLeod's lawyer says it was EM who was encouraging the men in that hotel room. The woman says that's not what happened. Carolyn.
Sean O'Shea in London, Ontario, thank you. Helicopters were in the sky again today, and more than 150 people on the ground, all searching for 2 children missing in Nova Scotia. Lily and Jack Sullivan, aged 6 and 4, were last seen on May 2nd near their home in Lansdowne Station in Pictou County. Global News spoke with their stepfather.
We covered everywhere possible. Even in the first day we did. Even with me running through the woods, I was ahead of the helicopters and ahead of the drones and stuff like that. Screaming as loud as I can. And as soon as I got back, I wasn't allowed back in the woods until a man dressed in military outfit said I could go back into the woods.
Daniel Martel says he believes the children were abducted and wants the search expanded. Investigators say it remains a missing persons case. Dramatic escalation of tensions. Ahead, India launches missiles at Pakistan. We have breaking news. India has launched a series of deadly missile strikes against Pakistan. It's in retaliation for last month's attack that killed more than 20 tourists in Indian-controlled Kashmir. India's armed forces says the strikes targeted 9 sites hitting terrorist infrastructure. Pakistan is firing back, with that country's information minister saying on social media that Pakistan has shot down multiple jets and a drone from India. Both countries have nuclear weapons, increasing global concerns over this latest escalation. The final countdown. Next, Cardinals get set to vote for a new pope. Anticipation is building ahead of the conclave to elect a new pope, which begins tomorrow. Cardinals will cast secret ballots, 133 of them deciding who will lead the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. They will keep voting for days if needed until at least 2/3 select the same candidate. Redmond Shannon reports from Rome.
Reading up before they go under lockdown, the gathered cardinals in their 12th and final meeting before sequestering to choose a new pope.
Amen.
26 of them spoke at Tuesday's meeting, some perhaps gently presenting their own papal credentials, before attracting attention as they crossed St. Peter's Square.
Everyone wants to know what the Cardinals are thinking ahead of the start of the conclave tomorrow.
I think that it will be a kind of continuity, but this continuity will be different.
It's always a blessing to be in Rome, but at a time like this, when history is kind of unfolding before our eyes, it's a beautiful experience. I think
Toronto priest Joshua Lobo says the selection of the new pope is a regular topic of conversation among his fellow students at Rome's Canadian Pontifical College.
We just want to see a man of deep prayer, a man who you can tell has a deep friendship with God, someone who is humble.
How long the secretive vote could take is anyone's guess.
Conclave is ironically one of the few things in the modern world where we can say we know more about how this worked 500 years ago than we do today.
Historian Miles Pattenden says more recent history suggests the Cardinals should find a consensus and trigger white smoke before the weekend.
They ought to have some idea what compromises will fly and what won't, and that's why we can be fairly hopeful that they will resolve this election quickly within those first few ballots. They're very strongly incentivized to do so.
The 133 cardinals who will take part in the conclave are now in seclusion in 2 Vatican hotels. They will have no contact with the outside world until they elect a new pope. They will vote once on Wednesday and then up to 4 times on each voting day after that. Carolyn?
Redmond Shannon in Rome, thank you. And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Castle Rock near Chester, Nova Scotia, Tobermory, Ontario, and the Alberta Legislature in Edmonton. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.